you ready to permanently fuse leadership and philosophy? Then a word of caution. You are about to enter the fully abstract yet wholly concrete realm of Leadosophy. Our ideas are not always so clear and distinct. To validate this proposition, we welcome the host of Leadosophy, Tim Woody.
Hey friends, welcome to another episode of Leadosophy. Super excited about this episode. It's my interview with Captain Ryan Leo, what you're going to hear in a few minutes. Ryan talks about leadership in general. We graduated from Gonzaga together, the Masters of Arts Organizational Leadership program. Ryan's got a concentration in global leadership studies, but Ryan talks heavily about leadership on a ship, a large cargo container ship. Ryan works for Matson Navigation Company. It's the leading Jones Act shipping company in the Hawaii and Pacific trades. He's the master of the 681-foot Motor Vessel Muanalei. And I put a picture up here, you can see it. Huge ship. And it can hold 2,500 20-foot containers. Ryan holds a BS in Marine Transportation from SUNY Maritime College and a Master Mariner of Unlimited Tonnage Vessels Upon Oceans license, which is issued by the U.S. Coast Guard. So super excited about this interview. We're going to jump right into it. I'm asking Ryan about how he got into the maritime world, what drew him to the ocean, to boats. I had a little bit of technical audio glitch here in the Leadosophy Nerve Center. I'm still a rookie podcaster, but Ryan's going to be coming in kind of mid-answer to that question about what led him into the maritime world. And then got about a 58-minute, 1-hour interview with Ryan. Awesome stuff. Hope you enjoy it. Here we go.
So I would go over there. So she was one of the first females to go there. She was an engineer. I would go over and visit the school quite a bit. Her husband also graduated from there, and he was working there as like the sailing coach and the instructor. So when I was in high school, I'd go over a lot and take out the boats and work with the sailing team. And I was never a great student. I never had a love for school. So coming out of high school, I wasn't looking to go to a traditional college. I was looking at all sorts of different stuff. And the maritime college, you spend the summer on a ship. New York Maritime College usually goes over to Europe. If you go to the one in California, you spend time in the Pacific. But that's what really drew me in was I always spent time on the water from when I was a little kid. I bought my first boat, a little 13-foot whaler when I was 11 years old for $500. I always knew I would be on the water, but I never saw myself on these big ships. But for me, it was just kind of a way to escape going to a real college. So I wound up there.
Well, and it's funny because you end up getting a master's degree at Gonzaga, so you came a long way from not liking college.
Yeah. Very true.
Did you have any reservations about getting into the master's program at Gonzaga? Just based off like you weren't really in that much into college?
I did.
Yeah. What were they?
Yeah. I did. I've never considered myself much of an academic, so moving into a master's degree, I was a little hesitant, and I definitely had a bit of like the imposter syndrome when I first showed up there. So meeting a lot of people that were really impressive and really smart, and I was wondering if I could do it. But for me, Gonzaga was probably the best academic experience I ever had. It was the first time I ever really wanted to be in school, not because I didn't need to be there for anything. I was there because it was something that I was interested in. I wasn't really looking to switch careers, or this was just something that interested me that I wanted to learn more about. I think for me, that made a big difference, which was, it was much older. I was 38 when I went for my master's, which was much different than being an 18-year-old kid going into college.
Oh man, tell me about it. Well, obviously for me, after 20 years in the Coast Guard, I didn't go back to get my undergrad until I was 38. So your perspective is completely different.
Yep.
When you're there voluntarily, and you want to learn. I guess safe to say, maybe you just have a different perspective on knowledge in your 30s than you do when you're a teenager. So, All right. So our final capstone project for Gonzaga, we had to create like a kind of like a website. And I know your website never actually, I don't think it's officially ever went like public, but you gave me access and I was looking at it. You have a quote on the front of your website, and it says, "The mark of a great ship handler is never getting into situations that require great ship handling." Can you explain, why did you choose that quote? Why does it resonate with you?
Yeah, I think it tied into leadership a lot for me because if you see on that website, I was really kind of tying in what shipboard leadership was about. And, when I entered Gonzaga, I didn't really have a clear understanding of what leadership was. And so all the different types or approaches to leadership, servant leadership, authentic leadership, global leadership, transformational leadership, at some point during the program there, it clicked for me that shipboard leadership is a unique skill set of its own that's unlike any of the others.
Can you unpack that?
It's a lot of the same fundamentals. Sorry, go ahead.
No, can you unpack that, what that means?
Yeah, so it's a lot of the same fundamentals as somebody who concentrates on organizational leadership or global leadership or servant leadership. But I think there's a lot more complexity in it. There's a lot of unknowns, and there's no going home. There's no turning it off at the end of the day. When you're the captain of any vessel, really, your door is pretty much open 24 hours a day. Even if it's closed, it's open. They're going to come get you if they need you. So living and working with the people around the clock adds a unique element where you're not only their boss, but you're also their confidant, and you're the doctor and their mental health professional and the police and the fire department. You spend time at sea, so you know what I'm talking about. And it adds a whole nother dynamic that wasn't necessarily covered in the literature that we were reading for our program. So, and where, I saw that ship handler quote, I've seen it for years, but it popped up when I was putting the website together. I was searching for nautical quotes, and I had just read, I was reading up on Greenleaf and servant leadership, and he was saying that one of the key aspects of servant leadership is foresight, seeing what's coming down the road. And that's where I made the connection there. Because I think to be a mariner in general, not a captain necessarily, but any type of mariner, servant leadership is a big part of it, putting other people before yourself. You're always looking out for the safety of the vessel and the safety of the crew, as well as your own safety. So foresight's a big part of that, trying to predict what's going to come down the road and anticipate the situations that you're going to run into. And if you could do that effectively, you don't have to take these extreme measures. You don't have to come into a point of extremis where you need to really, use 20 degrees rudder and kick the ship around and miss the sailboat. You would have never gotten close to it. And It's not, to me, that's the mark of a good ship handler and of a good leader. Because when leadership is really executed well, you almost don't even know what's happening. You don't feel like you're being led or you're leading. It's very fluid. That makes sense.
It makes total sense. I think of this foresight. That's actually a really great thought. And I'm thinking just docking up a ship, right? You need foresight. Where's the wind coming from? Don't start docking up the ship unless you know what the environmental conditions are doing, right?
Absolutely.
And then obviously the leadership connotation. Did you feel like the Gonzaga program, from a leadership standpoint, was almost more introspective?
Yes.
I did too. What did you take away from that, over those 2 years from an introspective standpoint? Did you change? Did it change you?
Absolutely. I really loved the program. I thought it was great. And it's funny because, the reason I wanted to go to Gonzaga was I didn't want to do an online degree or fully online degree. I knew because of my work, I would never get through a traditional master's degree. Yeah. And the online portion was great, but I really liked the aspect that you could attend all these in-person sessions. And when I signed up, I had initially wanted to do 4 of them. And the only one that I got to was the one that I did with you. When I got stuck on the ship for the leadership and hardiness course on the mountain climb.
Right. And
then everything out, the other 3 were canceled by COVID.
The leadership and hardy course was the Mount Adams trip, right? In Washington.
Mount Adams climb,
gotcha.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And so that being said, it's totally changed my opinion on online learning because I thought it was fantastic, and I'm really surprised at how much it influenced me from what basically became a strictly online program, except for that 4 days there. And the it really made me aware of how much I was missing. Like the initial stuff with Dr. Carey about the frames, how much stuff I wasn't seeing and how bad of a listener I was, which, and it's funny because, most, probably 85% of the program was online and you're not, there's a lot of Zooms and breakouts, but most of it is message boards and written papers. And so I found it kind of interesting that through mostly written communication, I became acutely aware of how much I was failing to really attentively listen to what people were saying to me.
Yeah, that's a great insight. It changed me too. It was, I needed the introspection. I was able to reflect, like, just like you, I was able to reflect over years of being in a leadership position and just kind of seeing maybe how, I guess, I don't know if I was always inadequate, but definitely, like you said, I was missing things. And as any mariner knows, communication is probably the most critical technical skill you can have in the maritime environment. And listening is obviously one of those key skills. So
absolutely. Yeah,
no, that's great point. My next question, and this is really, I go back and forth on this. It's this dichotomy between technical competence and leadership competence. So someone like you who has climbed the ranks on large ships, right? Is it safe to say you've had to build your technical competence long before and almost maybe more robust than you've had to build your leadership competence? Or is there even a difference? I don't know. I go back and forth on it. What are your thoughts on technical competence versus leadership competence?
I think there's a big difference. And I think you could have one or the other or both. And I think it depends on a ship and in your job. It depends on the role that you're in, where for an engineer or even a chief mate, their technical competence is probably more important than their leadership competencies. But when you come up to the top tier ranks on the ship as chief engineer or captain, that you need to have a solid foundation for both. A lot of people in life, I think, survive on luck, and it's no different in the maritime industry. People just kind of coast by and nothing bad happens, not necessarily because they're good, but just because they're lucky and, they don't get caught in a bad scene. But that's when the leadership kicks in, when you're not going to get off the dock without having the technical competencies. We're loading 2,500 containers in a bunch of hours, and the amount of information and systems that need to work for that to come together it's really robust. You're thinking fuel oil, ballast, trim, stability. It's a lot. So there needs to be a really sound technical foundation on the ship. But we have a big division of labor. It's not everybody's doing their own thing. We have, on my ship, we have 5 labor unions, and we have 3 to 4 departments, depending on what ship you're on. We have the deck department, which is cargo and navigation. The engine department, which is working in the engine room, but also on deck and in the accommodations, doing any type of maintenance and repairs. It's the stewards department, which does all the cooking and cleaning. And then we have a communications department, which typically on the commercial ships is just a one-man radio officer. But if you get on the gray hull government ships, it could be a much bigger department. So everybody is basically an expert in their own. Well, the higher ups in each department are experts in their own little fiefdom on the ship. Everybody's in their own union, and it's where those departments intermix is where the leadership really comes into play in my view.
Did you say there's 5 unions on the ship?
Yeah.
So how does that, there's a whole nother side of leadership as far as politics, right? Navigating that political, I guess, is politics a good word? I don't know if that's a good word for.
It's a bit of a bureaucracy.
Yeah.
And, it actually works. To people who aren't too familiar with labor unions, it sounds really cumbersome, but for the most part, it works really well. The unions get along really well. A lot of it makes what your job is very clearly defined. So you don't have to worry for the most part if this is something that you should be concerned about. It's cut and dry who's responsible for what, down to, who changes a broken door lock, to who mounts a TV on the wall, to who changes a broken refrigerator in somebody's room. That's all clear cut in the labor contracts. It's a lot of work when you are managing it. You have 5 different labor contracts in your office. So when you get that, you have to know. And so when overtime comes across the desk that's questionable or something like that, you have to really know and dig into the contract and figure it out. But for the most part, it's a complex but a pretty good system. It works out pretty
kind of runs itself for the most part, right?
For the most part, yeah.
When we were in Spokane for the 605 course, you brought up the maritime accident. I think it was 2015. The SS.
Yeah, the El Faro.
Yeah, the El Faro. Mm-hmm. That drove you a little bit right into leadership studies. Did it play a part?
Yeah, definitely. I was thinking about doing a master's degree, and I was at sea when the El Faro sunk, and I knew I had sailed with 3 people who were on the El Faro. Can you give a brief?
The listeners may not know what the El Faro accident was. Can you just give a brief summary?
Sure. Yeah. So when it was October of 2015, the El Faro was a container ship that was on a regular run from Puerto Rico to Jacksonville, Florida, Puerto Rico. They departed Jacksonville and they sailed into the eye of a Category 4 hurricane and sunk. And it's a really interesting case study on leadership because all ships these days have a black box in the wheelhouse, like an airplane does, and they recovered it from the seafloor. So for the day preceding the accident, you can listen to all the conversations between the captain and the bridge team. And they released those transcripts. The NTSB did a full investigation on it. A couple books have been written on it. There are hearings on it. A lot's been published on it. So having gone to sea and having, read pretty thoroughly what happened on the El Faro, to me, it was a failing on 2 levels. It was a leadership failure on the ship, and it was also a failing of an entire system, which includes the Coast Guard and the International Maritime Organization and all these maritime regulatory bodies that are supposed to prevent things like this happening. And so it's a very interesting case study. But I would definitely say it was the thing that drove me out of doing an MBA and looking more at leadership, which I'm 110% glad I did in retrospect. It was great, but it really got me down the path to reading about leadership and how organizations make catastrophic decisions, how systems fail, and stuff like that.
When I taught risk management in the Coast Guard, one of the case studies I used was the Zeebrugge ferry. That accident that happened, I think it was mid late 80s. That ferry that sunk off Zeebrugge, Belgium, that was going from Zeebrugge to Dover, and another classic example of systemic failure at all levels.
Yep.
Right, and it's just little things turn into big things, and next thing you're sailing with the bow doors open of a car passenger ferry. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I talk a lot about systems and processes, and I this is one of my assumptions is that if you can, there's a lot of broken processes within systems that if you fix the processes, it'll change what the people do. Vice versa. Instead of trying to fix the people, it still doesn't cover for the fact that your process is still broken. Right.
Yep.
So people are going to find people find workarounds on the ship or whatever for a broken process. So I like the system. I love talking, and we had that systems class too at Gonzaga. 610.
Great class.
Great class. I think that should be. I think any leader should understand that whole systems thinking dynamic. I think it's important.
I think so too, and I would encourage anybody who is interested in leadership to read about the El Faro sinking, because it really is a master's class in itself of just failures in leadership and systemic issues that went on in the U.S. flag maritime industry for decades. And there's a really good book called Leadership is Language, and it was by a It's written by a former sub-captain. He wrote, I can't think of his name off the top of my head, but he wrote another book called Turn the Ship Around, about how he had the worst rated submarine in the U.S. Naval Fleet and how he turned it around to become a top performer. And the first chapter of Leadership as Language is all about the Alfaro sinking. And he took those NTSB recordings and he went through how the captain talked to the crew and how the crew talked when the captain was present and how they talked when he wasn't present, and how, because you can hear the bridge recording, the captain comes and goes, but the recording's running 24/7. So you would hear the crew second guessing the captain, but nobody ever really speaks up when he comes to the bridge. And then, they yes him on the phone and then hang up and be like, this guy, he doesn't know what he's doing. But nobody ever really called him out. And then you have on the bridge, you have the helmsman, called the AB watch, who steers. He's what would be like an enlisted man in the military. And he breaks down the percentage of words spoken by the captain and the officer on watch and the helmsman. And, you have ABs that have gone to sea for 40 years who have a really good, they're excellent mariners. And I think he says the AB spoke less than 10% of the time up there. They're basically silent in a corner. And, for me, you're talking about communication. And that's the type of stuff that really interested me in studying leadership more. And that's it's really hit home with me listening to what people are saying. And, it's a bigger, when you go through the whole Gonzaga program, you get a much broader picture of what I'm talking about right now. But that sums it up for me pretty well right there. Is it safe
to say that there was a organizational culture issue within the ship, the dynamic?
Absolutely. Yep.
Was it more like an authoritarian style? Were people afraid to speak up?
Yes, I think to a point. I wouldn't say that's actually characteristic of all mariners. That's not something I think had you had different people on the ship, you would have had people that would have been like, listen, you're out of your mind. I'm not doing it. We're not taking this route. You're crazy. You're not sailing us into a hurricane. But on this ship, these people have worked together for quite some time. On my ships, people rotate. Only the captain, chief engineer, first engineer, and chief mate return. All the other crew rotate. They'll come for 4 months, and then you may never see them again. So I think there was a level of comfort on that ship that led to complacency a little bit, where they did trust the captain. And they said, this guy has a lot of experience. But when they started to see him making mistakes, they didn't speak up and break what we call the error chain, which was
human factors.
Exactly.
Human factors. Yeah, and there was I haven't read the case report, but I'm assuming there were probably multiple times people could have stepped in and broke that error chain, right?
I should rephrase it. People did speak up and say, hey, but they weren't direct.
Right.
It was more like hey, why don't we try this route over here, instead of like
assertively
hey, you're making huge mistakes right now. You're putting all our lives in danger. So They tried to steer him in the right direction, but he wasn't hearing it. He wasn't, he was embedded in the route he wanted to take, and he wasn't letting them break through. And, I can't speak to why that was, but they weren't communicating directly would be the best way to put it.
Right. And you said you had some friends that went down with that ship, right?
Yeah, I sailed with 2 people on the ship. One of them extensively, one of them just for a day or two, and then the chief engineer was a classmate and a shipmate of mine after we graduated.
Wow, the whole crew was lost, right?
Yep, the whole crew. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Did they ever locate the ship?
They did. Yeah, they located the ship, the NTSB, and they sent an ROV down. They were able to locate the black box, and nobody was recovered. No bodies or anything, but yeah, it was a huge loss, and it was a real shakeup. And
that's a gut punch to the whole fleet, right?
It was to the whole U.S. flag fleet. It's really changed the way things operate. From, in the last 5 years, the Coast Guard inspections that we have annually now are much more intense, much more thorough, and a lot of companies. Fortunately, the company I work for has always been on the right side of things, I would say.
Sure.
Not that they don't make mistakes, but we have a really strong safety culture at Matson.
That's
but
good.
I mean, a lot of companies and a lot of other where my friends work, they've had big shakeups in the company. A lot had to change to get them sailing again. I mean, a lot of ships got arrested, tied up at the dock, unable to sail until things were fixed. It was a big shakeup in the industry, and I'm 100% for it. I think it's sad that sometimes you need that wake up call to be an agent of change, but we needed it, and it's a really tragic event, but in my eyes, it's had a positive influence on the industry. It's made a lot of people a lot safer.
Yeah, I think it's safe to say that aviation industry, maritime industry, how many policies have came from fatal accidents or just terrible accidents. Unfortunately, it's sometimes how we learn when things go wrong.
Yeah,
it's
unfortunate, but at least something positive came out of it.
Okay, so I told you I was going to ask you about the difference between shipboard leadership and shipboard management, because you've talked about this before. I say there's a difference between management and leadership. I always say if you had a Venn diagram, there'd be some overlap, maybe some overlap. But from a shipboard management, shipboard leadership, can you talk about the differences or similarities or both?
Yeah, I definitely think there's a difference, and I would say probably a bigger part of your day as captain of a ship is management than it is leadership. But the leadership, even though it might be a smallest percentage of your time, is much more crucial to operating the ship safely. And I think the function of management is basically providing consistency and order within a system that already exists, that's already been developed. Where I personally look at leadership more like a skill set that allows an individual to find a new way to approach a problem, or empower others that you work with to participate in the decision-making process. And I think the common theme that we heard in Gonzaga was leadership is moving a group of individuals toward a shared common goal. So I definitely think there are big distinctions between leadership and management. But as you're saying, I think there definitely exists a gray area where you're doing both. I don't think it's cut and dry. But I think on a ship, we operate on what we call safety management systems, which are pretty robust operating guidelines about how we go through evolutions. And and I'm a firm believer in these systems. We are the maritime industry these days is a checklist culture. We have checklists for everything, and I love them. I think it really, for me, it takes a lot of the guesswork out of it. Somebody's already sat there and thought about it. But so for our day-to-day stuff, that is management. You're managing the system. You're going through the checklist. You're going through the motions. You're arriving on time. The leadership stuff, it can get a little tricky. And, my very first day as captain, this was not with Matson. I was working on a 2016. I was captain on a car ship, and we loaded up. We were in Corpus Christi, Texas, and we loaded up tanks and helicopters to bring over to Kuwait. And it was a pretty high profile mission. We had a lot of eyes on us, and the air conditioner broke right before we were about to sail. This was August in Texas.
In Texas, right?
And we're about to go, past Saudi, through Egypt, through the Suez Canal, past Saudi Arabia. So, I'm sorry, it was June in Texas, and we're going to be in Kuwait in August. So we had a port engineer on board who's like one of our maintenance supervisors, and he said, "Well, you got to go. You'll just deal with the air conditioner."
Is it just one one air conditioner, like one space, or
no? Our whole house AC.
The whole okay, gotcha.
Yeah, so we lost our entire AC plant.
Okay,
so we had no air conditioning in the whole ship. We're about to sail across the ocean in the Middle East into the summer. So it's not. So one of my very first moves as captain was to circumvent the port engineer and call the vice president of the company and say, "Hey, I'm not sailing till you fix the air conditioner," which was extremely nerve-wracking. And I was sure they were going to fire me and tell me you're an idiot, sail the ship.
Time is money, right? In your industry.
Yep. Yep. And they did not do that. I called the VP and said, "Oh, absolutely. You can't sail a ship to Kuwait in the summertime without air conditioning." So we left 12 hours later. We brought a bunch of techs in. We fixed what we needed to.
So you could have easily had a different VP that would have been like, either sail or I'll find someone who else will sail.
And that's where being a captain gets a little hairy, where you as a leader need to put the interests of the ship before anything else. And in some organizational cultures, the interest of the ship and the interest of the company don't always align. So, and that's a thing about the El Faro, where this captain on the El Faro had been fired previously for refusing to sail a ship that had a steering issue. He was fired from another company. Their steering gear failed. They were shifting from, I think, Baltimore to Virginia down the Chesapeake, and he ordered a tugboat to tow him. So $10,000 probably. And he was let go for that. So that's the kind of stuff that leaves, that's where the El Faro case gets really interesting, because you have this situation where this guy had been fired for doing the right thing, and now he's running into a hurricane. I wonder how much that played into him. But, basically, captains need to be ready to take a stand and say, "No, I'm not doing it," and deal with the fallout. Luckily for me, anytime I've had to call the office and say, "I can't sail the ship," I've received 100% support. But I've been lucky with the outfits that I'm in. I've worked for pretty good companies where not everybody gets that. So this is a long way to get to what I was trying to get to. But I think a lot of leadership stuff falls in the gray area. There's a lot of companies have operating procedures that you can read that tells you how you're supposed to approach a certain problem or execute a certain evolution. But I think the leadership stuff, most of it is the stuff that's not that cut and dry. That it's definitely a soft science, the field of leadership studies, where it's hard to put a finger on what makes a good or effective leader, or even what leadership is. But it's getting buy-in from the people you're working with, getting people to share your values, common values, and having common goals is what I took away as the big aspects of leadership.
Yeah, no, that answer deserved as much time as it took to talk about shipboard management and shipboard leadership. Because again, I always equate managing the processes and the systems like you're talking about, checklists, whatever they are, leading people through those either good systems or chaotic systems or whatever, making those changes, making those hard calls. That's definitely the leadership side of it. And like you said, I think there's probably a bigger gray area than people want to imagine. We talk about all these organizational leadership programs, and there's, again, I don't think there's any universal truths in the world of leadership, man. As soon as you think you found the truth, it's going to get cut out from underneath you. That's my experience.
Yeah.
Do you have a leadership philosophy?
I don't have.
Is it wing it? It's not wing it, right?
No, definitely not. But I'm actually just looking right now. Part of that Gonzaga program is writing your leadership philosophy.
Yeah.
And I guess mine's about 5 pages, so it's a little much to go through. But I think.
What are some common themes? I know you've written about this extensively, kind of our philosophy. What about some just narrow themes of leadership from a philosophy standpoint?
Yes, I think clearly communicating, your values and your ethics and your intentions are paramount to good leadership. I think treating people with respect and earning their respect, no matter what your position is. And, one of the big takeaways from me at Gonzaga was the difference between positional power and personal power. And it's easy when you get into the situation where you're the captain of a ship to rely on your positional power. I'm the captain. This is the way it's going to be. You're going to do it. But in my experience, that quickly falls apart when things start to go wrong. It's building your own personal power, which is the way you're able to influence others and to get them to see you as somebody who's knowledgeable and likable. And I think when you get into tense situations, it's really important that you've built that, and that going into the situation, no matter what and this goes for any organization, it doesn't have to be a captain of the ship, no matter what your title is, that you need to work really hard to build that personal power, and it should basically eclipse whatever your title is, if that makes sense.
I got to follow on. You said something I'm curious to hear your thoughts on. You said likability or being likable. Mm-hmm. Do you think that as a captain, it's important for you to be likable from a personality standpoint, just interaction, day-to-day interaction with the crew? Is that an important part of leadership?
I think it's fine to be the captain and have people not like you. I don't think there's any issue with having certain people on the ship not like you. I think for the most part, though, you do want to be a likable character. And I think, and I'm not saying that you can't be tough, but I think you can be tough and likable. And, less so these days. When I first started sailing 15, 16 years ago, you would get these tyrant old-timer captains who, you just hated them. And you would be so hesitant to pick up the phone and call them if anything happened. And
they led by fear, right? For the most part, it was fear.
Yep. And you don't want to be that guy. So I'm not saying that. I don't want to paint a picture here that it's all kumbaya on the ship and everybody loves each other. It's definitely not the case. And it's fine. I mean, I'm sure there are people out there that, I've had to fire people. I'm sure there are people that don't like me.
You're never going to please everyone. Never going to please everyone.
I'm perfectly comfortable with that. But, we mariners, the officers at least spend 6 months a year on the ship. And some of the unlicensed spend 8 months a year on the ship, So it's just an unhealthy environment to have to wake up every day and go to work with somebody that you don't like. I'm not saying you have to be friends, best friends, or even friends at all, but there's something to be said for working with people that you like and respect. And I think it's to me a critical component of building a highly functioning team, be it on the ship or anywhere. You don't have to be. I think I said it already. You don't have to be everybody's best friend, and you don't have to be. It's not. Shipboard life's hard. People are tired, but it's not
There's no escape.
You don't have to make it more miserable.
Right. Well, and it's I can go to work and then leave at the end of the day. Mm-hmm. You're 24 hours. There's nowhere to go.
No.
So it helps, I think, even more if there is some good relationships to develop. And, if you like the people that you're working with, probably makes the trip a little shorter. Mm-hmm. Right? I don't know.
I mean, you could see it on a ship when morale is high on the ship and the food is good and people are clicking and there's a mutual respect between everybody and the ship operates safer, more work gets done. It is a net positive for the company and the ship and the crew, for everybody involved. It's just in my mind, it's an all around win when everybody likes each other. And I don't want to, I think I was pretty clear. I don't want it to be it's not a cartoon, but it's real life. And, and, that gets lost in some of the academic stuff, I think a little bit, like there was a lot of stuff at Gonzaga was talking about building people up, and which I'm all for it, but I think there's a hard, there's a hard limit on that.
There's a certain grind aspect that's like the nuts and bolts, and like it's not all that theoretical stuff.
We were talking about the technical competencies, like if your job is to steer the ship and you show up and we're leaving port and you can't steer the ship, like you might be getting off on the pilot boat before we're even out of the harbor. Like
you can be the greatest leader on the planet, right? But if you can't steer the ship, yeah,
that's it. So like you have to be able to do your job. And I think it's easy to sit in an academic setting and talk about how you need to build up your low performers. And to an extent it's true, but I think it's hard to quantify how important it is to cut the dead weight sometimes as well.
Then those are the hard parts of leadership. Well, sometimes it's hard. Exactly. Sometimes it's pretty easy. Sometimes they make the decision for you. Right? Yeah. So you mentioned something earlier that I think if I could pin you down, you'd probably say it was part of your, or fit somewhere in your leadership philosophy. And you talked about empowerment. Mm-hmm. So this is maybe a multi-part question. The first question is, do you ever get any of your crew members approach you with a desire to be in your role one day? Do they ask, like, hey, how do I get to where you're at? Do you ever get questions like that? Or do you have one or two people that you think like, you know what, that person could do what I do?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. You always try to help those people out. And I think you empower people by, a good example on the ship is that when the captain comes up to the wheelhouse, we call it the bridge, there's a tendency for some junior officers to relinquish the watch, to be like, okay, the captain's here, he's in charge, he's got it. So, a lot of times you'll get a call if you're running through Malacca Straits over by Singapore, or you're just departed China and there's a ton of fishing boat traffic. You have a young third mate who's just out of school, and they'll call you up and, we have standing orders and night orders. Says, keep a 1 mile CPA, which is the closest point of approach. So don't let any vessel get within 1 mile. If you can't maintain that, call me. So you have to call, be like, hey, I can't maintain it. You got to come up. All right. So you walk up to the bridge. And there's a tendency sometimes for the junior officers to say, okay, well, the captain's here. He's going to deal with it. And I'm always real quick to be like, I am not doing this. I'm here in case you need me. But you're doing it. And you can do it. And you're perfectly capable of doing it. And you did the right thing by calling me. This is a situation that requires another set of eyes. Somebody else watching the radar, somebody else looking out the window, 100%. But it doesn't mean that you're off the hook now, and I'll step in if I think they're making the wrong call, but 90% of the time they do the right thing. And, sometimes we'll skirt a fishing boat, a couple 100 feet down the side of the ship. It's the
way closer than you wanted to get.
Yeah, but you got nothing you can do. These fishing fleets over there are massive. Their boats are everywhere, and we bob and weave and we talk to each other on the radio, and you do what you can. And they usually don't answer when you call them. But so I think in every aspect, letting people do the hard stuff when you're making the voyage plan, sitting down with the second mate, who's the navigator, and if you want to make a change. So if you come up weather routing, let's say I get weather every 6 hours on the ship. And if I see a system that I want to divert around, it's easy for me to email up to the bridge and say, hey, second mate, change the route. We're going to duck down south, put in these new waypoints. And this is definitely something that I've done after Gonzaga. I'll print out the weather and I'll walk up to the bridge and I'll say, hey, let's take a look at this together.
That's a great example, man. Great.
What do you
example.
think about this?
Yeah.
And I think it goes a long way. I think it goes to making it an enjoyable workplace. People want to feel that they are valued and their input matters. And, it does. And for me, it's always great. I'm dealing with meteorologists and weather routers on the shore side, but I always like to hear another mariner say yeah, that seems like a good plan. Or be like, oh no, I don't think we should do this because of this. And then, give you a little pushback, and it keeps you sharp. And it's, I think it's all around good. So yeah, I always try to, and empowering other people is something that I think I always tried to do it previously, but it's something I'm much more conscious about now. Yeah. After I finished the
you're probably seeking more opportunities as well to do that, looking for them, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I definitely a firm believer that the only way to grow leaders is you have to drive as many decisions downward as you can. I mean, how else are you going to grow a leader? I mean, there's no, you're training people to take your place one day, you know?
Yep, absolutely. You know, I'm a big fan of letting, you know, the chief mate's usually on the bridge, letting him do normally the captain will come up at a certain point and take over as we're getting closer to the harbor, closer to boarding the harbor pilot. But, you know, I'll let the chief mate take it all the way in, or the second mate or third mate if I think they're competent and I see a lot of potential in them, and let them get the experience. It's the most fun part of the job. It's like extremely rewarding, and exactly what you're saying. It really is the thing that nurtures the next wave of leaders.
I think one of the hardest things from my standpoint, and went back in my Coast Guard days, from, you know, technical boat driving, whether it's in the surf or whatever, extreme weather conditions, how far do you go to let someone fail, especially when there's a safety component into it, when, you know, potentially jeopardizing safety. That's can be a very gray area where it's gut instinct sometimes, you know. And I'm sure you've seen that obviously in your world.
I think it's at some point it boils down to 100. You know, I think you guys are probably in more of a tricky situation on the ship. Things are happening slower.
Right.
So if you're using the right bridge resource management tools, you should be able to foresee any dangers down the pipeline pretty far out. Now, you know, if we were in really heavy traffic, I'm not going to give it to the second mate or third mate to bring it into the pilot station.
Right.
I would keep it myself. But, you know, coming into San Francisco, I would let the chief mate take it in all the time. It's, you know, when traffic's light, and it's not that it's not complicated, but it's just that there's ample opportunity to foresee anything that's going to happen. And if you needed to take the con back, which would mean like you take over control of the ship, you would have ample time to do it and correct any mistakes they made.
Right.
Be in deep enough water without any real hazards around.
When you're in close quarter situations, whether you're coming into a port or just around heavy traffic, what is the bridge size? How many people are making up the bridge? Like what's the most amount of people you have on the bridge?
I mean, almost. So at sea, if you're in the mid-ocean in the middle of a trans-Pacific, typically two people on the bridge, a watch officer and an AB helmsman. We call them a helmsman, but they're not steering. They're primarily there for lookout. The ship's on autopilot. When you get a little bit closer into port, you would have the captain basically as an observer, and the officer of the watch, and then an AB. So that would be what we call the watch. So we have watch conditions. Watch condition 1 is a officer and an AB, an able-bodied seaman. Watch condition 2 would be the captain, an officer, and an AB. Watch condition 3, which we skip a lot, depending on, would be the captain, 2 watch officers, and the AB. And watch condition 4 would be the captain and a pilot. And a pilot is a mariner who stays in one port. They come out on a small boat and they will climb a ladder up, and they guide. They're experts in that port. They can draw the charts from memory. And every port around the world has a pilot. So watch condition 4 would be the captain, a pilot, an officer, and the AB, the helmsman.
Are you always in watch condition 4 when you enter a port, whether foreign or domestic?
Yeah,
always.
Pretty much. I mean, you know, a lot of times you'd be surprised in foreign ports. You could be pretty far inland before the pilot gets on board. In American ports, predominantly, the pilots come on, 10 miles offshore, deep water. But in a lot of foreign ports, you'll come through a breakwater before the pilot's on board. So that would be a time when we're using watch condition 3. And a lot of times we go right from watch condition 2 to watch condition 4.
Right. How much, when you take a pilot on board to bring you in, let's say, so I've told you I live here on the Columbia River. Mm-hmm. Yep. When that Columbia River pilot goes out, how much responsibility is transferred to that pilot from you as the ship captain?
It's a bit of a gray area.
That's why I was wondering. I almost wondered, was there tension that comes up on that?
No, for the most part, I would not say there's tension, but there's always a question about how much liability the pilots have. So the pilot comes on and basically takes over and starts conning the ship. He starts giving orders directly to the helmsman. It's kind of one of the beautiful things about the maritime industry is that the systems that we have in place allow people who have never worked together before to move these like gigantic, some of the world's biggest pieces of equipment into these pretty tight spaces, and so for the most part, no. But I've had to, in Greece once, I had to relieve a pilot, and one of my second ship as captain, and I had seen it done once before in the Suez Canal when I was a junior mate, and the captain had to relieve an Egyptian pilot who just lost control of the ship in the canal. And then, so you always think about it like, and then what would happen if I have to relieve the pilot? And it was a weird situation where the same thing, we were trying to come off a dock. There was a lot of wind and the pilot lost control of the stern. The stern was swinging in. We were going to hit the dock. And I just started calling rudder orders and engine orders. And all of a sudden I said the pilot just stopped talking. So it was never like a formal transfer. And then
it was implied.
I was like, oh, I just relieved the pilot. Like, I have it now and I have to deal with it. And then we did, and I got the ship turned, and then I said, all right, I turned it back over to him. But so you as the captain, you can override the pilot. It's not something that's done often. And if you do it, you better have a really good reason.
That's like the last tool in the toolkit. Exactly.
Yep. It's compulsory. You don't have the option for the most part. There are some exceptions, but 99.9% of ships coming to port are required to take a pilot. So if you don't like what the pilot's doing, you might relieve them, but they'll call vessel traffic service and they'll put you at anchor until they get you another pilot. So it's not something that's done flippantly.
Yeah. And you talked about the beauty of the maritime industry is kind of, you can just get together and never met this person and can still operate kind of seamlessly together. A lot of that probably has to do with speaking common terminology, maritime terminology, right? Back to communication.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
100%.
So I'm mindful of your time. I'm super gracious that you agreed to come on here and talk to me. It was good seeing you. I got a couple just kind of final questions. The first one is maybe one of your biggest challenges, leadership challenges in your career. Like, I'm sure maybe relieving the pilot was probably a pretty big one. You talked about the air conditioner,
Yeah.
Is there anything else that sticks out?
I think any time that I've had to make the call that the ship couldn't leave the dock for one reason or the other it's always something that leaves you I'm trying to think. You do it and you have to do it and it's you're doing the right thing, but it's not something necessarily that you're happy to do. So it's always a challenge to say, luckily, anytime I've had to do it, I've gotten good support. But, if you have to make the call that I can't sail the ship, it's a
big deal.
It's a big deal. And, you better have a good reason for it. And, I think the most challenging part of my job is the human factor, like dealing with the people on the ship. And, we have some really interesting characters in the maritime industry that make the job really enjoyable.
The fishing fleet would agree.
Yeah. We really run the gamut out there. My last second mate was he'd spent 25 years as a lawyer before he started going to sea. I sailed with medical doctors who, people really are drawn to the sea and they want to get out there and see the world and do it. You get poets and artists, and you get guys who spent 15 years in prison, 20 years in prison. They come out and get a job wiping up oil in the engine room. Great guys, but it's you just get a lot of characters, guys that just aren't going to do an office job. And I find it really enjoyable, but it's definitely challenging dealing with the people on the ship. And I say that challenging in a good way. I think you want your job to be challenging. And yeah, it's making it all work. It's definitely a job.
Do you have, every time you sail, do you have certain issues like leadership challenges that persist every time? Like it's the same thing, like I'm dealing with this all over again?
There are reoccurring issues, but I wouldn't necessarily say that you see the same leadership challenges. I think that's the beauty of like what we were talking about with systems. I think when a new challenge arises, the industry as a whole is pretty well set up to incorporate that new challenge into the system and make it almost a function of management. So we get new things popping up all the time. The industry is heavily regulated. These new regulations pop up and it becomes tricky things to navigate sometimes. But you come back, you go home and you come back to sea and it's just part of the routine again. We've incorporated it into our procedures and into our voyage plans, or, whatever it is that the new regulation or the new union rule or the new grievance or whatever it is, we roll it up into the SMS, and which is our safety management system, and we move on. And it's good because you have ships all over the fleet that are experiencing these things, and we have one overriding system that's one overriding management system. So a lot of the issues, you might not even see them before it gets rolled into the safety management system. I don't know if that answers your question, but
totally.
It's unique every time we go out. There's always new challenges.
I always say if it wasn't unique, you'd quickly devolve into complacency. I think the uniqueness keeps you from getting complacent, right?
Mm-hmm.
What's next on your agenda, man? You have any long-term goals? I know I've talked to you about potentially writing a book. What's some goals for you? What do you got?
I don't know. I was just on the ship with COVID. My normal rotation on the ship is 70 days. And that turned into 197 days this last time. So been home a little under a month now. So, just to give you an idea how long I wrote that website that you're looking at, I was on the ship when I put it together. So
that's crazy.
And yeah, it's pretty wild. So, and this is the first time I've looked at it in a couple months now. Yeah. I started working on the book a bit, but we were in the dry dock and things just got kind of crazy. So I have a big chunk of vacation right now. Right now, I think more than anything, I'm kind of it was gone for a long time. It was a good experience all in all, but, I'm just really kind of enjoying time with the family, spending time at home. I don't have any, my son was born about 2 weeks after I started the grad school program. I think I was having a bit of a midlife crisis there, thinking, I better get this done now. But, so I think it's just kind of nice to be home for a little bit.
What better time to start a grad school program right after kids born?
Impeccable timing. But yeah, I don't have any. I'm pretty happy where I'm at with everything, and I don't know. Sometimes I think about doing another degree or something like that, but I think if I were to do anything, that would be a couple years down the road. And for now, I'm just kind of enjoying being home. And I've been thinking about picking up. I did write an outline and a intro paragraph to a book on shipboard leadership, and I think after the new year, I'd probably start to look into that again. But
I'm sure you have a lot of stories to share.
Yeah, I don't have I'm enjoying some downtime right now. I don't have a pressing desire to dive into anything these days.
I think after being gone as long as you were, I think it's a noble goal just to kind of enjoy some downtime with the family.
Yeah, I think it's important, right? Just to kind of enjoy the simple things in life, and that's where I'm at right now. So.
Well, again, I'm gracious that you came on. I have always enjoyed talking to you about anything, but definitely leadership. I enjoyed going through the program with you. I think even when we weren't in classes, we would reach out every once in a while and text or whatever. And I appreciate, I'm sure people will find a lot of value in some of the stories you told today and some of the really good leadership nuggets you had in here. So I thank you, and thank your wife for letting you come on and let me borrow you for an hour and a half. I appreciate it.
No, I appreciate it, Tim. It's great. It's great talking to you. I appreciate you bringing me on, and my first podcast, and makes me feel important. Somebody wanted to interview me about something.
You acted like it was your 100th podcast. I'll be honest with you. Hey, Ryan, let's stay in touch, and I appreciate it, and happy holidays to everybody.
Absolutely. Happy holidays. Thank you.
All right, Ryan. Bye.
Thanks for watching and listening to another episode of Leadosophy. If you liked what you heard today, hit that subscribe button and check out Leadosophy.com and learn more about Tim's ideas on philosophy and leadership. We'll see you next time.